Trump has collapsed the petrodollar. It's because of him that the Strait of Hormuz is closed. He has destroyed the fertilizer supply chain for this year's harvest. Millions of people are going to starve this year because of what he just did. The fertilizer did not go in the ground. The yield loss is already locked in and the strait is still closed. And he's on Truth Social on Easter Sunday morning calling them bastards and threatening nuclear war at 8 p.m. tomorrow evening. 45 million people are now facing acute hunger. But people are not realizing the severity of this because there's a delay. You put the nitrogen on the ground, you grow the crops, and you harvest them in September. If the crops are not now in the ground, you don't harvest anything in September. But Western media, very unethically and recklessly, keeps presenting this as food prices will be higher next year. War-driven fertilizer shortages don't just make your groceries dearer. His actions have already cut yield. That means less grain is being grown. The International Food Policy Research Institute has already done some modelling of what we face. This Iran war shock, this Strait of Hormuz block is going to cause a drop in global cereal output of between 10 and 20%. And higher food prices is its own problem. Your politicians are telling you up front that the choice has already been made here. It's the poor who are going to eat less. And the euphemism of reporting it to you as expect higher food prices is part of the control system. It is designed to prevent the sentence from triggering the political response that is proportionate to the reality that we face. Europe now faces starvation conditions for its poorest populations because Brussels chose the American military alliance over food security. They tell you to expect higher food prices. That language is a pacification tool, but the arithmetic is brutal. Every economist and politician in Brussels knows this, and they chose that framing anyway. That is a deliberate act. That is an act of violence. That means people cannot prepare. If you understand now in April that the food supply might be affected, you have time to put the potatoes in the ground. By telling you not to worry, it'll all be over soon and that prices will just be a little higher, but you're used to that. Your political inertia is going to kill you before the hunger does. Half of all human food production depends on synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, and it is the Gulf that produces or transits most of it. 46% of globally traded urea comes from the Persian Gulf. 30% of all fertilizer trade passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Gulf states account for 20% of global traded volumes of key fertilizers, and the price of fertilizer has already surged as supplies dry up. Planting season in Europe and North America is now, April to May. Fertilizer applied in July does fucking nothing. The window is closing quickly. For some places and some crops, it's already closed. According to Eurostat, there are 37 million people in Europe unable to afford a proper meal every day. That's before the war. 37 million Europeans were not eating reliably every day before this started. That's the baseline population that gets hit first. Northwest Europe feeds itself with 10 million hectares of wheat. Wheat yield with optimum nitrogen is 7 to 9 tons per hectare. Wheat yield without nitrogen is 40 to 60% lower. A 40% yield cut on 10 million hectares means 32 million fewer tons of wheat. If this war continues till June, at least 50 million people are going to be pushed into acute hunger. Acute hunger is not higher shopping bills. It is famine. It is now the 6th of April. If the fertilizer is not applied by May, 40 to 60% yield drop on cereal crops at harvest. Mass hunger across Europe by autumn and famine conditions across the global south. 28th of February, Europe had spent 3 years scrambling to replace Russian gas. That transition was a failure. Europe replaced Russian gas with Qatari oil and oil from the United States. This pivot has left Europe more exposed, not less. European gas storage is now at its lowest level in 3 years. Europe is already in an energy crisis. You're just not being told about it. It had planned to fill that deficit with more oil imports. Then the war started. Europe is now in a bidding war for replacement LNG against the United States and Australia. And Europe is losing that war. And it's losing its oil shipments. 11 LNG cargoes diverted from Europe back to Asia, plus 2 redirected to Egypt and 1 to Turkey. These are tankers that changed direction mid-course because somebody offered them more money. So now European import costs are expected to increase by 100 billion euros over the next year. Europe is going to enter next winter with the lowest gas storage in at least 5 years, and this time with no Russian pipeline to fall back on. Italy is the most acute immediate case. Qatar has been supplying 30% of Italy's annual gas needs. The UK's largest domestic energy provider, Octopus Energy, released a public explainer last week, and they said global gas prices have spiked in the last few weeks, driven by the conflict in the Middle East, pushing UK wholesale energy prices up dramatically. They told customers to expect visible tariff changes immediately. UK energy is priced off European wholesale gas. The 70% gas surge feeds directly into UK household bills from April. So in a country where 13.4 million households are already facing fuel poverty. What's next? The European Commission has confirmed that the first 10 days of this conflict has already produced an extra €3 billion burden on European taxpayers through higher fossil fuel import costs alone. Over the next year, €100 billion will be extracted from European economies via energy costs. Not invested in green energy, not recirculated socially, just extracted and given to oil barons. Germany, Europe's largest economy, is already in recession. Its economy relies on gas-intensive manufacturing, and the chemical sector that underpins that industry has already made a statement saying that they will not be able to absorb a 70% gas increase. People who last winter were having to choose between heating and eating won't be able to afford either. I'm running out of time, but I'm going to do a second video that makes the case for Europe's green exit from the petrodollar. Now is the time. It is the only rational response to this crisis.